Hi, I'm James from Load Street Studios, and this is how you mix a band live. Okay, so it's not how to mix a live band, it's how to mix a band who have decided to record their material with you all together, so they have played it live in the room. A couple of weeks ago we recorded the lounge band Matahari, and this was the result. You can see that we've got a stereo recording, lefts and rights. What we did was we mixed them on our Spirit LX desk in the live room. They loved the sound so much that they just wanted to keep that to perform to. So I decided then to record just the lefts and rights because they were happy enough. So there's a whole video on what we did to set them up and what we did to mix them in the room. Go and check that out. That's the previous one. And this is what I have done to the track post-recording. So this is what it sounds like after all the processing. It's nice and smooth, everything's in its right place. It's kind of a mono mix even though we've got lefts and rights, but that's just how it was on the day. And it was fit for purpose, which is, the biggest thing as far as getting your jobs right is to do it to the client's spec. And if they like it, then, that's great. That's a job well done. So here we go, straight into it. Lefts and rights are bussed into bus 1, where I am affecting them with the same EQ processing. The EQ processing is through the FabFilter Pro Q2. I like this because it's just very pretty and it does what I want it to do, but the main component that I'm interested in is the mid-side functionality. If you don't use Pro Q2, that's fine. Just try and find an EQ that will let you do mid-side, and you can see how simple the process that I've used is to just cut away everything under 180 Hertz by quite a fair amount, 15 dB, on the sides. So we leave the mids as intact. Okay, so there's half a dB push on a shelf at 115, but can you hear it? I don't know, it's up to you. It makes me feel safe and secure, and later on when we get through the gain staging, it does help. But at the moment, just cut away everything from the bottom and you get this kind of, sizzle on the sides. And it might be difficult to hear, but here we go. Here's on and off. Yeah, it's really, really subtle, and it could be accused of thinning out, but that's okay because we add more to the mix later. So that's just through the bus, and then the bus is going into our master output where we're doing the in-the-box plugin mixing. The first thing I go to is my NLS bus, which is a plugin by Waves which emulates different types of desks. The Spike emulates an SSL desk, the mic emulates an EMI desk, and the Nevo emulates a Neve desk. All have different noises to them, which is very nice, and you've got the bypass button as well. I have decided to not use the noise from the desks themselves and just use the plugin to run things through because A, it's my first port of call on my master bus anyway, so it's always there, and B, we've got some desk noise coming from the Spirit, so this is off and on. Okay, you can hear that bit of drive coming through the desk. It's just a little boost in level, and that comes from here. The further you crank that, the more drive you're going to get, and eventually you're going to hear some analog style distortion, which is fine if that's the style that you're going for, but for this, that's quite okay. On to the next part of the gain stage. I've actually pulled some gain out with the Q1 which is just a normal graphic equalizer, just made by Waves, a little bit more transparent than native ones in Logic, but your native one will do exactly the same. And I've pulled the left and right input down by 3.5 dB. So I'm just trying to give us a bit more headroom to do some stuff with the compression later on in the chain. I also noticed to my ear there was a little bit of nasty around 65, 66. So I've put that little notch out just to just to pull down any resonance that we might get from the bass from the cajon smacks. So again, in and out. Okay, again, very subtle. We're just taming what's going on down this end of the chain. So onto a different type of EQ. This is the linear phase EQ, and I use this to muck out all of the crap down the bottom below 32 Hertz. Now, I can't necessarily hear 32 Hertz through my near fields, but I can hear it. I can hear what's underneath that through my sub, and you'll find that a lot of mastering engineers can hear what's going on down there as well, because they have actually, been sensible and they've paid for the stuff that allows you to hear down there, and they've got incredible ears, so they would go and investigate what's going on the low end to make sure that your final master actually sounds quite nice and there's no deep artifacts that are going to, fart someone's speakers to death. So regardless whether you can hear it in your own studio, I use this as a bit of a safety net, just to make sure that all that nasty underneath that isn't really relevant to what we hear anyway, if everything's being played on laptop speakers. Some people say you shouldn't think like that, but it isn't relevant. So let's just get rid of it. It's gone. And here's the difference, very subtle. That's the EQ portion, so far anyway, and now I'm going to move on to our compression gain stage. So I start with a master bus compressor. In this instance I'm using the Cytomic, the glue, which is great. On multi-track projects this thing really does exactly what it says on the tin, it just glues everything together. And there's not a lot of makeup gain, the threshold's fairly low, so we're actually engaging the compressor. But I'll be honest with you, this is from the mastering preset, which is very, very helpful, and I've fine-tuned it to my own needs and wants and whatnot. Gentle ratio, very fast attack, and we let it release under its own steam, and it'll choose that. Here we go, this is out and in. So you can see very, very little engagement, but it's doing something, and that's what we're after at this stage. Okay, next we'll move on to the next part of the compression chain. We can start to get a bit more aggressive now. This is Waves LA2A, and it very much emulates one of the classic units. But the great thing about this is once you turn it on, you get this kind of jump in everything. Like there's a bit of energy, there's a bit of sparkle, there's a bit of, even dare I say it, width and image, and it's just great. So I like this, and these are very close to the Start Me Up settings. They've been tweaked a little bit to get what I want, but again, we're not going crazy. A little bit more aggression because we've got more stuff coming through it, but overall we're still keeping everything quite gentle. I tend to leave the analog emulations off as well. Waves do this as a kind of standard with their classic compressor emulations. They have modeled the sound of what the Transformers used to sound like. And that's lovely, that's great if you're in the right situation, but because we have already got the desk coming through the LX, the Spirit LX in the room, then any more noise is just going to add, and it's just going to add fuzz and nasty, and we just don't want it. So here we go, in and out.
validation that most of my life isn't real.
So you can hear that big jump in richness, big jump in everything. So we're going to keep that as it is. Very nice. So onto multiband compression. This looks more frightening than it actually is, and I'm not really doing a lot with it. I'm just running stuff through the unit. And in essence, because we've got to a stage where we've smoothed a lot out, we still want a bit more of that bass coming through. But instead of boosting the bass, I'm trying to squash the mids here. So this is quite key information, really. This is the saxophone and the voice, and most people would think that you'd want that poking out, and you do, of course, but at the moment it's poking out too much, so we just want to control that a little bit, bring it back into line, and this is the out and in. Okay, so what we've done is we're trying to pump this middle bit, this middle band of EQ. And if you're unaware of how to use multiband compression, then there's tons of great tutorials on it. But in essence, you just got to think of it as it's a compressor, but it's compressing just what you want it to across the frequency spectrum, rather than a whole track or a whole mix or whatever. You can go into even more detail. It isn't, however, an EQ plus a compressor. It doesn't quite work like that, but you can compress certain bands of EQ. That is the point. So very briefly, we're trying to keep the low end intact, very slow release, so there's not much pumping going on. As soon as it engages, it'll stay engaged for half a second or whatever, and you know, we've got the gain at a reasonable normal level, and the threshold's quite low, so really we're probably not going to be affecting the low end too much. This we are going to be affecting. You can see that nice big gap in the middle, and that's what we want to do. And then the top end, we've got a slightly slower release than the mids, but faster release than the bass, in order to expand that top and just sort of keep it a little bit open and a bit airy. So here we go, in and out once. That's nice. So it's poking, but it's controlled. So let's just recap. Desk sound, gain staging, first lot of EQ. We haven't done a lot of master EQ on here yet, but that will come onto that. We're just getting rid of the crap. The glue is your first master bus compressor, just to keep everything together. The LA2A gives you a little bit more level and a little bit more sparkle. The L3 is keeping everything under control in a more surgical way. And now we're going to put this L2 on, which is just another limiter, but this is looking for level, really. So again, the L2 made by Waves. The L3 was made by Waves as well. But there are native plugins that will, that you can use instead of these, and there are other limiters available. So there's not much you can do with the L2 except turn the quantize off, because we've got desk noise, and we're going to add noise a bit later on with ozone. But for the moment, don't worry about any dither. It's the more dither you have, the horribler it sounds, basically. So we're going to let ozone handle that, and not the Waves plugins. Again, we're putting the out ceiling quite low now, so as soon as we turn this on, this is going to slam. It's not going to let the track go any closer to 0 than -1.5. Or okay, yeah, -1.5. And our threshold's fairly low as well, so we're not going to pump this compressor limiter. We're just going to get a little bit more level out of it. So here we go. Okay, so very subtle, and actually we're not attenuating, we're not taking any gain out of the mix at this stage. So why use it? Well, that's a good question, but ultimately it's there to just provide us with a little bit more signal so that we can process it a bit finer in Ozone. So here we go, onto the big boy, step by step. Mastering reverb, big reverb, but not a lot of it. Just sounds great. We've got a nice bit of width, and you may have noticed so far that the track is quite dry. We didn't use the digital reverb that we've got in the room, so that was on purpose. I wanted to have a bit more control over it. So I'll show you what we've got. You see how it smooths out that vocal, it smooths out a lot of stuff that's going on in the mix, and there's not a lot of it, and just less is more, very much so in this sort of case. So I moved from my reverb to my stereo imaging. I'm keeping the bottom end intact, and I am spreading a lot of information across between 700 and 8.5K, just to give it something, because the sound from the room is fairly mono, so we're just sort of adding a little bit of digital presence, I guess. And with this top end, we're really spreading what's going on that top end from 8.5 upwards. Usually we'd use that for cymbals, but because there weren't any cymbals, we're just sort of spreading the top end to give it that upward expansion as we want it. So here we go. This is very subtle, but it's worth showing you anyway. Okay, so we've given ourselves a little bit of width there. So I said about EQ, we haven't done a lot previous to this signal chain, but here we go. We're going into the post equalizer in Ozone here. Kept the bottom end very much as it was. We've given a bit of a boost at 200 just to sort of thicken it up a little bit. Cut down in this sort of muddy range between 800 and 1000. What are we actually on, number 4? Yeah, 800. Just cut that out because it's, give the rest of the track some space to breathe. And then we've boosted up in this top region all this information, this important information between 1000 and 8.5 is definitely poking above where we're looking for. And we just maintain a bit of that sizzle for the end. I've put the EQ in analog mode, so we've got something nice and thick to work with, but here you go. This is the post EQ. Really nice. We've got that mix sort of, it's nice now, and we've got things sort of in the right place. The sax is starting to poke, the reverb's doing its job, and I think it's now time to find the level and get the level to the right sort of stage. So we're going to go with Ozone's maximizer, and this is set to quite a smooth character, so there's not too much pumping going on because it's just not that type of track. And here's your noise dithering section. If you want to learn about dithering, go and ask someone who actually knows about it. All I know is the more you've got, the nastier it sounds, but a bit is essential. So here we go. This is my maximizing track, and it sounds like this. It just brings that depth out and a bit more rich, and you get a fuller idea of what's going on. The harmonic language is a bit more interesting, and there we go. So that's my Ozone chain, which has done wonders to this track. I'm very, very happy with it. But if you listen carefully, I'm sure you've heard it by now, there is a lot of noise on this track and maybe just a bit too much. Nothing wrong with analog. It sounds great in the right situations, but when you've got too much, it's distracting. So I'm going to pull out this Waves plugin called X Noise, which is more of a forensic type of plugin, and it's going on the very end of the signal chain so that we can use it to its full capacity. The clever thing about X Noise is that it will learn a noise profile across your frequency range, and it will only start to reduce that noise profile. So if we listen to the end of this track where there isn't any music, but just silence where the desk noise is coming through, take a listen to this. Okay, you can hear that static, you can hear that stuff if you're listening through a half decent pair of speakers. And what we want to do is get the X Noise plugin to learn what it's looking for, and then we'll get it to get rid of it on the track itself. So here we go, we'll play, we'll learn, and we'll pick a profile, okay? Helps if you turn it on. Okay, so you saw it start to settle down around this sort of shape, and that's the sort of shape that we came in with. So this threshold and reduction settings have been set to what I want for this particular track, but you can play around with them. Higher the threshold, the more of everything else you're going to compress or reduce, and obviously the higher the reduction, the more you are going to reduce. Your dynamics are very similar to how they work on a compressor, because it more or less is a compressor. And then your high shelf is what you want to boost up the top, but we don't need to boost anything. So here we go. This is off and on. Try and find a quieter part of the track so you can really tell the difference. So here we go. So there you have it. I think you'll agree that getting X Noise in the mix really does make a massive difference to the professional sounding nature of your recordings and your mix and your productions. So that was my way of mixing Matahari's live session in the box. If you've got any questions, you want me to clarify something, or you've got any suggestions for next time, please let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and there'll be some more stuff coming up soon, so make sure you hit that subscribe button, yo. I'll see you next time. I've been James. Thanks very much. And Steph, you still here? You gonna go? Okay. Good.